So I give you Dion McInnis. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Okay, everybody's got the same question. I know it, so I'm going to address that question right off the top because it comes up every time I do this presentation. And that question is, why is a man giving a presentation on women in leadership? It's okay to go ahead and ask that question. I'll share a quick story about that, and then we'll get into the good stuff. That story will stretch for a minute, and that way we'll see if there's any more other shoppers coming in. So I start my presentations out with that topic, right? Well, I did this presentation for JSC, for a group of women managers. And once the presentation started, they closed the doors. It was at Gilruth Center. They closed the doors, and I start my shtick, right? And then about 10 minutes later, this woman comes in one of the back doors and sits down, and then this raucous laughter comes from her table. And she raises her hand, she says, "I'm sorry, I know I was late, and I know I'm already interrupting you, but they told me I have to tell you this story." I said, "Okay, what you got?" She says, "I arrived late, but I was only a couple of minutes late. And I came up to the door, and it was closed, and I heard a man's voice. And I knew that there wouldn't be a man doing a presentation on women in leadership, so I went to every other room in the Gilruth Center to find the right room. But here I am at the right room." The reason is I have always been around and surrounded by amazing women. And it has given me a perspective on the other side of the fence that I think there's some things that I can show and reveal to you and encourage in you that I can do because I am not on the same side of the fence as you. I am not in the same forest looking at the same trees. I can stand out here and show you things that maybe that you hadn't noticed before. What we're going to talk about with women in leadership is we've got to understand that it does begin with you, and it's supposed to begin with you. Okay? What we're going to do today is about how you're going to be able to find you, honor you, and celebrate you, because to do that, leaders must know themselves to empower others. If you're not familiar with yourself and your skills and your abilities and those incredible innate traits and characteristics that you have, you're not in a position to empower that in those that are around you. And that's whether at work or at home in community service, at the family dinner table or the church committee. It doesn't matter. Leadership involves similar things in all venues, but leaders need to know themselves first. Now, what is the greatest fear? Okay, we've heard that it's paying taxes. No. We've heard that it's, public speaking. Not really. I've seen some interesting research that said that the greatest fear is to be open about ourselves, okay, which is kind of what came up at the lunch presentation today. That the greatest fear is to reveal ourselves and to be vulnerable. And so what we're going to talk about today is about how, as you understand who you are and understand how to tap into that and help others do the same, you're overcoming this great fear. You're able to connect and express in ways that make you a better leader and make others grow around you. Now, why does all this work? There's a woman named Shelley Taylor who's at University of California in Los Angeles. And she had done some work on how people respond to stress. Leadership is a stressful position. Again, no matter whether it's at home or at work, leadership is stressful. And so she decided she wanted to look into how people respond to stress. And we were all raised the same way. We were all taught that under times of stress, we have one or two reactions, right? We either have fight or flight. And she thought perhaps there was another reaction that people might have. And so she did some research that actually included women in the research instead of just men. And she found out that y'all are hardwired differently. Under stressful conditions, oxytocin kicks in and ends up encouraging a behavior that she called tend and befriend. And for that, she went back to the caveman days when the caveman's out chasing away the saber-toothed tiger, the threat, and the women come together inside the cave with their children, and they tend and befriend. And so it's hardwired into who we are as far as the type of responses under stressful conditions. We live in a culture where you do it independently, you grab your bootstraps and all these things, which has got to be conflicting and confusing when your mind is saying, no, you want to gather people around you. Again, very, very much related to what she was talking about at the lunch. about wanting to have the friends and want to have the connections. Okay, you're going to see a lot of similarities. I was smiling at the table as she shared these stories about, wanting to just talk and eat. And what is that? Oh yeah, tending and befriending. Okay, so this way of finding out about yourself and how that works in leadership positions, part of it starts right with this research. Okay, you're wired under stress to want to tend and befriend. There's a wonderful book, and the reference is on the second to last slide. I always mispronounce her name, so I won't try. But it's called The Voice of Her Own. And what the book relates to is how important it is that you tap into your voice. I think that women are without their voice and men are without their emotions. So we're basically both walking around with half of what we have. Okay? And what she talks about in her book is how important it is to find our voice, to do so in writing or some other way, okay? But then to find out a way that we can find and express ourselves. As we get more detail in this, I'm going to share with you some amazing stories of what was created by women who paused and said, I got to write this down. We'll also talk about on becoming a person. That's another reason why this look at leadership works. Carl Rogers is one of the great psychologists of the 20th century, and he wrote a book called On Becoming a Person. It was really a collection of essays. But one of the things that he said was that if we share with others the things that we don't think they'll understand, those are actually the things that people do understand. As she talked about the different things in her life at lunch, as Lisa did, and watch all the heads start to bob. Yeah, I felt like that. Yeah, I felt like that. I was watching everybody's heads move. It was a deeply spoken story. That's Carl Rogers' term. It's if we share the deeply spoken story where we think, you're not going to understand me. That's actually where you will understand me. Because human beings have these experiences and emotions and feelings that they can share with each other to connect. So the goal and the way to connect is to be a little vulnerable and share those deeply spoken stories. There are a lot more. To be a leader, though, you need to be you. And that's the key of this whole thing. Women in leadership, find the power, find the potential. It all begins with you and understanding who you are and all the amazing characteristics that you have and how the life that you've lived gives you the resources you need to be a woman leader. William James had said that the deepest human need is the need to be appreciated. I'll give you two examples of this. When I first started working in higher education 27 years ago, I'd been a freelance writer and photographer. I had 2 kids, a wife, and a mortgage. And I needed to find a more stable income. And here I was in higher education at the College of Engineering. Ask me how much I knew about engineering. Nothing. But about a month or so into the process, I was working on a project in an open area in the dean's suite. And the dean walked by and he tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're doing a good job." That little sign of appreciation assured me that I was doing the right thing, that indeed I might be able to pay the bills for the family for a little while longer, and that motivated me for a long time. Fast forward to that workshop that I presented at JSC that I told you about. One of the women conveyed how when she started in aerospace, she was one of the few women in aerospace. And one of her managers tapped her on the shoulder and said, "If you want to be a manager, I can help you get there because you've got what it takes." And she went on to become a manager. To which I said, "That's great. When's the last time you touched somebody on the shoulder and said, you have what it takes to be a manager? When's the last time you empower and encourage somebody like that manager did for you?" So the deepest human need is to be appreciated, and we do that by connecting. We do that with the confidence and self-confidence that comes with knowing who we are as individuals, and then being able to empower other people to do the same thing. Tom Peters has said that leaders are natural empowerment freaks, and that women are natural empowerment freaks. So you can draw the correlation, the obvious correlation. The key for Tom Peters is this notion of empowerment. Leadership that enables other people to grow, enables other people to be fully who they are, and you can do that because you have the confidence and understanding of who you are. Your ability to empower others is your ability to honor and celebrate your own powers. Now, a really smart guy said that. Okay? I mean, you may not have heard of Tom Peters, but that's a smart guy right there, I'm telling you. Okay? But you've got to really be able to understand and appreciate and celebrate your powers as well as your humanity. The foibles and all the other fun things that make you who you are. So when we talk about leaders, women in leadership, we're not talking about just getting you excited and motivated and rah, 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 out the door, let's go. It's about affecting change in how you think and change in how you function. The 3 steps, I think, is first to be able to honor individually. To honor yourself individually, but to honor those around you individually. Again, it goes back to that notion of being able to be appreciated, to be known and accepted for who you are. To help somebody see that who they are is going to fit into the organization, is going to help accomplish the goals of whether again the family or the church committee, whatever it is. So if we want to affect change, we have to honor individually, but we also have to bond together. Okay, that's in any organization or any entity. Well, if one of the things that affects change is to bond together, and one of your natural inclinations is what? To tend and befriend, which bonds together, then who's in the best position to help out? Some of you may remember Sandy Mossman. She was the exemplary superintendent of CCISD and retired about 5 years ago, I guess it was. I remember she made a presentation years ago, and she was explaining the challenging times in the school district and where they were going. And she made the comment that, well, women under stress, there's 3 things we like to do. We like to shop, talk, and eat. Fast forward 10 years from that, and I find this article from Shelley Taylor's work. Okay? The modern examples of tend and befriend could very well include what? Shop, talk, and eat. And oh, by the way, what is this whole conference about? Shop, talk, and eat. Because it's a way, it is a way to come together in a natural way where you build the bridges, build the connections, break down those plexiglass walls, okay, and be able to connect and make some things happen. Now, one of the downsides is that we know that frequently in the workplace, a woman has 2 critical enemies, typically. One of them is herself, and the other one is another woman in the office. Okay? A lot of you have had that experience where women will turn on each other. And that's a natural thing, and we see it in human resources, we see it in psychology classes. It's a thing that happens. Okay? And so finding confidence in yourself and accepting who you are and letting others do that kind of flies in the face of that sort of natural competitiveness that psychologists say goes back to the caveman days too. Okay? We are creatures that have been thousands of years in the making. We can't just turn these things off and on. But we can understand them, see them, change our perspectives about them, and then grow authentically with that reality. So if we want change and not just excitement, we honor individually, and we bond together, and then we celebrate collectively. Now, for those of you who are taking notes, if you want a PDF of this, send me an email, and I'll send it to you. The notes now can help fill it in later, but if you want this as a reference, particularly some of the materials at the end, like I said, just email me. You'll see that email address at the end of the presentation, and I'd be happy to send it to you. But if we want to affect change, not excitement, we've got to honor, bond, and celebrate. What do I mean by celebrate collectively? That's to celebrate within a group, as a group, where everybody gets to be their own part. They don't have to become Borgs, assimilate like in the Star Trek movies, but celebrate as a group, honoring each other's capabilities and their stories. And when you start doing that, change happens. Important change happens. And the leader's job is to help make that happen. Well, where do we start in finding ourselves? Okay, got to make sure I've got my time thing down. Where's my timekeeper? Okay, she's going to keep me on. I've got 2 timekeepers, right? In finding ourselves, we need to think about writing and listening. Okay? In writing, our culture is if there's something that's useful, they'll find a way to make a cottage industry out of it. Okay, so writing's very important. So then all of a sudden, here comes the journals with the pretty covers and the scented inks and there's a whole industry about designed journals. and books about it. Just write. Just write your thoughts. And it's going to be amazing what you'll find that leads you to. Later on, I'll share the story about how Oxygen Media was formed because a woman was mad and wrote in her journal. I'll share that story with you. But when you write honestly and put it to paper that you can look at later and review and consider and analyze, it gives you a different perspective about what's on your mind and what's important. And sometimes it actually shows you the solutions. You just didn't know it in the moment. Okay? So as you write, some people are habitual. 7:15 every morning I'm going to write. Well, good for you. That's not me. Okay? I can't form a habit if I want one. Okay? Everybody's got to find their own way to it. But to be able to write and get your thoughts down. I teach writing workshops. I teach photography workshops. And even in those, we talk about the value of writing for reflection. When you think about what you write and what you say, it gives you insights. It gives you an idea of how you think. If you're taking photographs and listen to your own words, you know why you're inspired, and then you know how to create the photo. If you're facing a challenge at work and you write some thoughts down about it, the evidence of what needs to happen now is right in those words. So along with writing comes listening. And the first person you should listen to is you. Because what happens, think about those college classes, and there's 50 people or 500 in it, and the professor is spewing forth, and people are writing. And then somebody raises their hand and they've got a question or they make a point, and you probably write that. And then you are the one that raises your hand and makes a point. Do you sit down and write that too? So from very early on, we're conditioned that we will write down what others say, but we don't tend to write down and listen to what we say. That's why it's so important to find that habit of writing and put thoughts down. One of the books that was mentioned was my daddin' book. Daddin' is the verb of being a dad. I made that verb up in 1998. And the reason is because mothers have a verb. You mother children. If you go home and say to your family, I saw a woman mothering her child in the parking lot, they will have images of nurturing and caring and mothering. If you go home and say, I saw a man fathering a child in the park, the response is, did you call 911? So I decided that dads needed a verb, so I made up the verb daddin'. The book of 300 pages comes largely from the things that I had written over the years, from the time I was 16 till the time I wrote the book. All those words and all those reflections helped feed the book. When I was 16 and had no reason to believe why I could even be a father, if you catch my drift, I wrote a poem about putting a child to bed and what that might look like. And that poem was about putting a child to bed and saying, I hear your stories, but you need to sleep. I rewrote the poem of that concept 30 years later. And that poem was, oh, you're not going to sleep, buddy. We're talking. I want to know what you did. I want to know about that baseball game. I want to know about why you laughed so hard that your nose ran. I want to know everything about... Wake back up. Wake up. Wake up. We're still talking. Okay? So in the interim, I wrote the poem the first way. Years later, I wrote it saying, I don't want my child to go to sleep. I want to learn about their day. But I had that perspective because I wrote it to begin with in 1972. So as we write these words, they become context and reference, and they give us all the solutions that we need. That and the solution of listening to each other. Buddhist wisdom says that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. We've all heard that. If you listen to life, you're surrounded by teachers. In this room, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There's about 25 teachers in this room. How many teachers have you met this week? How many teachers have you met in the month? Almost everybody you encounter gives insights into human behavior, what motivates, what guides. And the more you know about humanity and the more you know about common sense wisdom, the better leader that you're going to be. So to find yourself right, and then listen to yourself, listen to others, and then you end up with this cycle of what you write and what you learn by listening. That becomes a huge resource for you as a leader. You can also then encourage others to do the same. As you start to understand yourself, that puts you in a better position to encourage others to bond together. Now, there's a couple of things that we want to talk about, plus some realities. Okay. To bond together, there needs to be some sharing. Sharing needs to be done in a safe environment and in a way that works for both people. Back in the olden days, which is more than 5 months ago, back in the olden days at the university, I had this thing called a morning walk around. I was very, very good at it for the first 12 years, and then I kind of got not as good at it on the last year and a half or so. But the concept of the walk around is I would walk around to the offices of my team members that were on 2 floors, and I always did it by noon, and I would just come by and go, "Hi." And if they wanted to talk, they would. If they were too busy, they'd go, "Hi, boss, too busy." Got it, out the door. And sometimes conversations would last an hour. Okay. So the ability to share has to have the opportunity to share. The same for your family, same for your church group, same for your work. There needs to be the opportunity to share and then the safety to share. Keep in mind what we started with, tend and befriend. That involves sharing. Okay. Now, Dr. Pennebaker at University of Texas has written a great book called Opening Up, The Healing Power of Confiding to Others. And he brings up these 6 points that I think are very valuable because we do need to share, but as with all good things, there needs to be a few boundaries, right? So one of them is self-disclosure will change the nature of your friendship. When you reveal something, that deeply spoken story that we just talked about, it will change the nature of the relationship. For those people who thought that our guest speaker today was only Blair, they were probably a little shocked to find out, no, she's a woman who played Blair. And to hear the stories and the fact that she wasn't always confident about herself. Oh my God, she's a real human being? Are you kidding me? Okay. And that changes the relationship and understanding that we have of who she is. So when you share, when you allow each other to share with each other, okay, self-disclosure will change the relationship. Not always for the better, so you just need to be prepared for that. But as you engage as leaders, you need to allow people to share, and you need to be thinking about what you're sharing with those deeply spoken stories that Carl Rogers talked about, because that's what connects us. So we need to connect. But when we connect, we also understand that there are boundaries. And once that process starts, it may be a shock to the other people that you're actually saying things that are vulnerable and real. You know, we've all heard about when our children first realized that as parents we're not perfect. That's shocking to the kids. Okay? Same thing happens with your friends and your employees. Okay? Again, she talked about that at lunch today. You think we collaborated on this or something. But it's very important that it does change the relationship. We need to understand that hearing trauma can be the trauma for a listener too. If we share something that's very difficult, it can be traumatic. I'll never forget the first time a woman was in front of me and said, "And this was the day that I was raped." Rocked my world. Silly, naive little me thought, I don't know anybody that's had to go through that. And there she was, one of my employees, standing right there telling me. It changed everything. I wrote a presentation for a Take Back the Night event within 2 months of that. Got involved with the shelter when I came here. There's a lot of things that largely came from that awakening when Lori said, this is what happened. And so when we share, it becomes traumatic to the other people in a way too. We're not just saying it into the wind, so be careful with that. Social blackmail exists. I think it's a whole lot worse now with social media than it was when Dr. Pennebaker wrote this book 20, 30 years ago. The expectations of the listener can affect the content of the disclosure. So when you're sharing or having people within your organization share, okay, expectations have a role to play. When I had staff retreats with my team at the universities that I've worked at, there's been sharing moments, but we kind of set boundaries ahead of time. You know, what kind of responses there could be, no dramatic, if somebody said something earth-shaking. People's motivations for disclosing their secrets are not always pure. We've all seen that too. I'm going to tell you this to see if you react. I'm going to tell you this to see if you'll have some sort of reaction or we get some sort of special relationship. So keep in mind that those things are happening. When you're sharing or encouraging others to share, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Telling and holding secrets can be a maladaptive substitute for taking action. I think you see that a lot in offices. It's called gossip. Okay? And it's the gossip that tears people down. But as leaders, we have a role and responsibility to that. And as people who are naturally inclined to tend and befriend, you find yourself concerned about that even more, because part of tending and befriending is sharing and listening. Well, then you've got all these complications. Well, then you celebrate collectively. When I did that workshop for NASA, one of the things that we worked on is to help understand who we are as individuals, but then the way to break down barriers with others, particularly men and men managers and even sons, is to show really who you are. Okay? Show us, their homework assignment was to come back the next week with something that they created based on who they are. Was it a score of music? Was it food that they cooked based on their culture? Come to us with something that is of you so we can understand. We've all understood or heard the stories when the mother first threw that fastball to their son, and the son says, "How'd you learn to throw like that?" And she says, "I was striking out kids on my street when I was 12 years old." And all of a sudden, the son looks at the mother and goes, "Oh, there's a new understanding." I did a workshop on how boys can be encouraged to respect women, and a lot of that comes from openness with stories, where they go, "Oh, you're not what I thought, you're more than that." So sharing those stories and realities and then creating based on that and encouraging your team to create based on that creates a reality, a connected reality that comes through that sharing, again, with its precautions. Writing. We're doing pretty good, aren't we? Oh, I got 10 minutes. We're not going to have much of a writing exercise, but I want you to write down this writing prompt. Okay? The writing prompt that I use in a lot of workshops, I would like to take credit for it. It's not my idea. It came from a professor at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, and she doesn't remember where she got it. So in the interest of fair reporting, this is not my brilliant idea, as much as I hate to say that. Anyway, the writing prompt is 2 words. I remember. Write it down. I remember. I'll give you a short story to give you how empowering that is. There's a local company in town of all women. The owner of the company said, "Dion, it's been a tough year. I want to do something for my team. They gave everything of themselves for us to succeed this year. What do I give them back?" I said, "Give them themselves. Say, thank you for giving me yourself this year, but I want to give you yourself back. That's my holiday present. That's my Christmas gift to you." She bought each of the employees a journal and a little bracelet thingy. And I did this workshop for them where we went through some timelines, those of you who were in my first workshop, those timelines, and used those to kind of draw out some of their stories and the people in the context of their lives. And then we did I Remember. And this one woman wrote, I remember being named senior class president. I can tell you where I was standing, what music was playing in the cafeteria. I can tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you what the weather was that day. I can tell you everything about the moment that I was named senior class president, because I wanted to be freshman class president, sophomore, junior, wasn't able to, but I was senior class president. And I knew that right then, when I was named senior class president, we'd have the best senior class president in the history of that high school. We'd get more done than any other senior class that high school had ever had. I remember my friends starting to stab me in the back because I got that. I remember politics and bureaucracy making me back off on some of my dreams. I remember developing those habits when I went on to college and I did more things to appease others instead of follow my passions and my dreams. I remember getting discouraged for the things that I couldn't do instead of feeling good about the things I could do. But at this minute, I remember being named senior class president and that power and that energy, and I'll never forget it again. And she closed her journal, and all the other women in the room started to weep. Right? So you write down that I remember, and it will guide you to important thoughts, powerful thoughts, vulnerable thoughts that show you solutions. Writing is a key part of it. Sharing and listening. Along the way, listen to others, but also listen for what they have to say. Not everybody articulates in the way that helps you understand. So listen to and listen for. The listening and love of others and of self. We're all on this planet together. Some people you just shake your head at and walk away from. Okay, but they're here too. Takes all kinds to fill up the freeway, right? Okay, don't forget to love yourself. We have the command to love one another as we love ourselves. So it starts right there. You've heard the old analogy, I'm sure, 1,000 times. It's just like on the airplane. If we have trouble, put the mask on yourself first. You have got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And that includes your role as a leader. Don't forget the grandmother story. Short version of the story. I was in San Antonio in a freak situation. I was on McInnis Lane, named after my grandpa, and I ran into a lady at the end of the street, and we get to talking, and I told her about my nonprofit organization that saves women's stories and the images they inspire, and she hands me a poem. It was the first poem she had ever written in her life. Why did she have it in her pocket that day? She handed it to me, and it was about her grandchild who had had brain surgery and was told the child would never walk again. And about that moment, the creaking screen door opens up, and there's this little 5-year-old girl with buzzed hair and a wicked scar across her head. And I'm holding this poem, the first poem she ever wrote, and it was about that little girl right there. I said, "You want me to put this on the internet, don't you?" She said, "If you don't mind." Listen to what people say. Listen for what people say. Pay attention to what people say. Create poetry. Create poetically. You don't have to be a poet to be poetic. Live creatively. Live artistically. As you do that, you'll tap into more power than you thought you had, and then you encourage others to do the same, which allows them to bring all their abilities to the table. I believe we are called to creation. We can't create in 7 days, but we can certainly create with our talents. We can create when we cook, dance, sing, write, problem solve, troubleshoot, and we share. It's critical that we share. The homework that we've got, you've got homework. Think of these things and start to create and to share. Create from who you are and share that with others so people understand, but then encourage that within your own group and organization. Empower talent. Don't guide it and restrict it into narrow channels. Let people do the things that they're good at. The very first retreat I had at UH Clear Lake, we were trying to figure out the format, and I knew that one of the women on the team, I had a team of all women, and one of the women on the team loved to sing. I said, "Okay, you're in charge of entertainment, and it better include you singing." Okay, because that's what was in her soul. She had to be able to have that. Everybody has to find a way to find those outlets. So you have to keep that going for change. You have to keep that going if you want to make it change and not just emotions. Write morning pages. That's one term for it. So here's the story about Oxygen Media. That 13 years ago, I was in Dallas at SMU at a women's event. And at the reception area, I had reception beforehand. I had the chance to talk to the woman who founded Oxygen Media. That wasn't Oprah. Oprah was part of the original team, but the woman who conceptualized Oxygen Media was a former executive producer with Nickelodeon. And she shared with me that what she did is she was so frustrated at what she saw in the business that she wrote every morning, just venom, bile, anger, frustration, irritation, This is what it could be. This is what it should be. And she said after doing that for about 6 months, she went back and read it and said, holy cow, this is a business plan for a whole new way of doing TV. Because as she challenged some of the things that she saw, she also wrote what would make it better. And after months of doing this, there were the basic points of creating a new way, a new media, and now that's Oxygen Media. Create, I may have mentioned that a few thousand times. Okay? Always remember to tend and befriend. It's hard sometimes, but you're wired that way. You've got jobs and success models that push you one way, and your brain's pushing you another way. There's a way to make them come together. Share. Always share. I can only know that much of myself, which I've had the courage to confide to you. Okay? If you're not willing to share something, then you don't own it. That doesn't mean you're taking out billboards sharing your worst characteristics. But be you, be real, be authentic, and people will respect that and connect to that, especially if you allow them to be the same. Here are some friends for your journey, since I've got 2 minutes before I get the 5-minute warning. Here are some friends for the journey, though. A Voice of Her Own by Marlene. See, that's why I don't pronounce it. Voice of Her Own is a wonderful book about the power of claiming your voice and starting with it in writing. Artist's Way and Right to Write by Julia Cameron. Those are incredible books. Basically saying you write, man, you rock. Because writing is such a powerful instrument, such a powerful tool. And that doesn't mean you have to be a Pulitzer Prize winner. It means that you're committing your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your ideas to words. I could do anything if I only knew what it was. Amen? Hallelujah. Okay, quick digression there. And we've all felt that way. We've all felt that way. It's a wonderful book by Barbara Sher. Aladdin Factor by Jack Canfield, and I forgot, Mark Victor Hansen. If you're a breathing human being, I suggest that you read that book. It says that basically we all have dreams and we all want some help to get there, and most of us would love to be somebody's genie to help them accomplish their goals. It's a wonderful book. Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am by John Powell, Jesuit priest. Opening Up the Healing Power of Confiding in Others. Okay, he's a professor at UT, or was. His is a little more academic, as you can imagine, but it still reveals some important things. So if you want to be a leader and understand the power that you have naturally, innately, that you have as women, understand who you are first. In that is all the tools and resources that you need if you just own them, share them, and build with them. If you want the handout, there's my email address. See things differently, change perspectives, grow authentically, rock the world.